The recruiting dead period came to an end on Saturday. Things are about to get spicy. Things are about to heat up. We got some big battles ensuing on the trail. Which Big Ten recruiting storylines stand out to me as things are getting going again? Gonna cover all things recruiting on this edition of Big Nation.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
Covered a lot of different topics on this show, on this channel over the years, but maybe not as much recruiting. Maybe we need to get back into that a little bit. Maybe recruiting needs a bigger focus here on the old BTT. You know, growing up, I was a big recruiting guy. I would log on in the mid-2000s. I would log on to Rivals. I would log on to, maybe this shows maybe how old I'm getting right now. I would log on to the old Scout.com before there was 24/7 Sports, before there was On3. There was Scout.com, and I remember USC really dominating recruiting at that point. The Trojans are certainly trying to get back to that point, but you know, there's a lot of other people covering a lot of other topics, the conference realignments, and all these topics that, frankly, I don't maybe have as much interest in. So you might see a little bit more recruiting talk, and I've really gotten back into that and covering that and following that a lot more. So, and it's the lifeblood of our sport, of what happens on the field, and the Big Ten. Now, recruiting a lot different than old 20 or so years ago, Ted, right when I would log on to Rivals.com and Scout.com. I think it's a lot more intriguing with the financial factor certainly on it right now, but it's the same 20 years ago, 40 years ago as it was back then. You got to be able to recruit. You got to be able to bring in top high school talent if you want to get to the top of this sport. Now, you cannot, I repeat, you cannot talk about Big Ten recruiting without talking about the battle of not only the Big Ten's number one recruiting class, but the battle of college football's top recruiting class, that being the Oregon Ducks and the USC Trojans. Now, depending on what service you look at, the Trojans might be number one, or the Ducks might be number one in the country. A late surge from USC has gotten them to number one in the country right now in the 2026 class, according to some services. But for the longest time, it was Oregon that was the number one class in 2026. And I want to start with this Ducks class right now and just how loaded it is already with their commitments at the top right now. They have 4 commits within the top 45, according to 24/7 Sports right now. Cody Green, an offensive tackle from Mater Dei. Now, I'm going to mention Mater Dei High School a couple of times during this show, because that was a high school, of course, in Southern California, down there in Santa Ana, that a lot of players went to USC in previous years, a decade maybe or so in the past. But that has become a bit of an Oregon pipeline as of late. Some of the top players from that specific high school, a lot of people say the top high school football program in the United States of America, playing in probably the toughest high school league and conference in America. A lot of those players are going up to Eugene now, so they've certainly capitalized on that when USC has been a little bit down when it comes to a recruiting standpoint. But Cody Green has really shot up recruiting boards as of late. In the latest On 300 rankings, he shot up to the number 9. I think it was number 9 overall player. So he's in the top 10. Oregon is after 2 offensive tackles that are rated higher than Cody Green. Oregon did a great job getting some good, really good offensive linemen, high 4-star talent in the 25 cycle. So Alik Terry and company doing a great job recruiting on the offensive line, certainly. And Cody Green right now is going to be an offensive tackle that they're going to have in their bank and is going to, I think, play a big-time factor in Oregon Duck football in the future. Kendra Harrison, the number 1 tight end in the country, all the way on the other coast. on the East Coast, coming out of the state of North Carolina, is just an absolute specimen. They say it about a lot of people. This kid was built in a lab. I am convinced Kendra Harrison was built in a lab next to the Tyrannosaurus at Jurassic Park. Like, is 6'7", 245 pounds, and he can run like a deer. Now, this might say something about his athleticism. Not only is he a Dan Lanning football commit, but he is a Dana Altman basketball commit for the Oregon Ducks as well. When you look at the Antonio Gates of the world and the Tony Gonzalez's, when you have guys in college playing multiple sports, that speaks to their athleticism at the tight end. Now, when you look at Oregon, they are becoming a little bit of a tight end factory. They just had Terrence Ferguson, who was the fastest tight end in Indianapolis at the NFL Combine, ran the fastest 40-yard dash of any tight end over there. And then they got a guy coming in Kenyon Sadiq. Pro Football Focus has him as I think the 6th-ranked tight end, which I thought was a little bit underrated, considering who was above him in this class. I think he could be a contender for the Mackey Award. And then you got somebody like a Kendra Harrison. Oregon is hot after 3 out of the top 5 tight ends in this class, but Kendra Harrison is going to top them all. I think he's got the potential to be really special. And Kendra is all in. He is 100% bought in. He's trying to make as many trips out to the West Coast. He's trying to get to Eugene as often as possible. I think he's taking a little bit of a role as now of a recruiter to try to get some of this other elite talent to come to Eugene, Oregon, certainly as well. Tredarian Ball, the running back out of Texarkana, Texas, Texas High School in Texarkana, Texas, over there, he's just the ultimate weapon. He's the ultimate weapon, and he tells you about it on social media. He's a very confident kid. There's a lot of running backs out there, I think, that can do a lot of different things, but he can do it all. He can do it all. They line him up out wide. They line him up in the slot. They line him up at the traditional running back position. Now, when you talk about the ultimate weapon and when you talk about Oregon, you might think of somebody like a LaMichael James. You might think of a DeAnthony Thomas in that mold. I thought of the mold of, remember Percy Harvin over at Florida, where they lined him up in the slot. He would motion into the backfield. He would contribute in the run game as well. He kind of did everything for those Tebow-era Florida offenses. I see Tredarian Ball in maybe a similar mold and a similar role possibly in his future at Oregon. They've got Bat Mulatalo, defensive lineman out of the state of Utah as well. And they are going to get more commitments in the top 50, folks. So the Ducks are not done. Let's move down the West Coast to USC. Right now they have 4 top 85 commits. You're looking at linebacker Xavier Griffin. More on him in just a minute. A couple of corners out of California in R.J. Sermons and Brandon Lockhart. Samante Katonga, a defensive lineman, another 4-star top 85 top of player as well. 3 of the 4 of them, all of them except Xavier Griffin, are from the state of California. General Manager Chad Bowden has come in, and they are putting a renewed emphasis on trying to get back and dominate the state of California. Now, let's talk about Xavier Griffin a little bit. Xavier Griffin is the one kid that's not from the state of California. 6'3", 200 pounds. He's listed as a linebacker right now. Now, 200 pounds might not exactly be the frame that you're looking for from a Big Ten linebacker standpoint, but he's extremely explosive and both coming off the edge in pass rush situations and finding the football. He's able to use his linebacker radar. Once he finds the football, he's there. He's there, and he's there very, very quickly. I think his best role in college, unless he puts on a lot of muscle and really bulks up during his senior year, and he could certainly do that when he gets to USC, certainly as well. So over a 2 or 3 year span, he could certainly put on more weight. But I think you want to keep his explosiveness. I think he's going to work best probably from an outside linebacker or edge standpoint. That's where his film really pops. Now, I mentioned him being from the state of Georgia. This is a big commitment right now. A top 10, top 20 overall player in the country. But remember last class for USC, they had, Isaiah Gibson and Justice Terry, a couple of 5-star defensive linemen from the state of Georgia. Hey, when you have 5-star defensive lineman from the state of Georgia, Kirby's going to come knocking. And a lot of times, Kirby's going to win. Those two guys flipped their commitments out of Southern California, and we're obviously not USC Trojans signed on the dotted line in this 2025 class. So that's something that I would watch out for Xavier Griffin. Hopefully USC can retain him right now. I am so looking forward to a lot of recruiting battles down the stretch between the Oregon Ducks and the USC Trojans right now. Championships can be built with West Coast talent right now. In the 26 class and the 27 class, there is talent all over the place at a lot of different positions on the West Coast. So the battles between Oregon and now that USC is starting to really ramp up their NIL game, they're really starting to ramp up once again their West Coast recruiting game. These are going to be battles, and a lot of these battles over the last decade or so have been won by the Oregon Ducks. Now getting USC back into the game, we're going to see, I think, the next, going into spring, going into summer, and then as we get closer to the season, this is kind of commit season coming up here in the next few months, it's really going to tell us how far USC has gotten in this short period of time since Chad Bowden has become the general manager right now. Currently, 3 of the top 10 players in the 24/7 composite in the state of California are already committed to Oregon or USC. I'd expect probably 3 more. Quarterback Ryder Lyons. Now, I thought Ryder Lyons, 5-star guy, he's going to take an 18-month mission. He's more of a 27 guy, really, at this point, but still a very, very talented quarterback out there on the West Coast. I thought he was maybe a USC lean. I watched an interview with him recently. He says Oregon is getting a hold of him almost every single day. Oregon is very invested. Really, the Oregon quarterback triangle, so to speak. They just lost Jonas Williams, who flipped over to USC. The reason that was now Oregon is putting their chips into the middle of the Jared Curtis table, who's the number 1 quarterback in the country out of Nashville, Tennessee, but they're also going after Ryder Lyons right here. I still tend to think he still might end up at USC between the two. Mark Bowman, here's Matter Day again, the number 2 tight end overall in this 2026 class. I tend to favor USC with him a little bit as well. We mentioned Kendra Harrison already committed to Oregon. There's a 5th-ranked tight end in this class in Brock Harris out of the state of Utah, and Oregon, I think, is really heavy on him. He's another kid that's going to take a mission coming out of high school as well. Davon Benjamin is another name to certainly keep an eye on as well. And then you go to Brandon Arrington, a corner wide receiver type of combo guy over there. I think he can play both of these positions at the next level. Another guy in the state of California on the West Coast. He's got speed and length for days. 6'2", 180 pounds. Now, I was kind of watching some of these shows, guys breaking down his tape and what he could maybe play at the next level. They really liked his length when it came to being a defensive back. There's not a lot of spots. He's got that track speed, so having the track background might help Oregon in this recruitment right now for Brandon Arrington. But having that length and speed at the defensive back position, that can be difficult to find sometimes. But you look at his tape, and he's extremely explosive. You can certainly see the track speed on the football field as well. They were saying, hey, it's a track guy playing football, but there were some people that said, well, no, he's a football player with that elite level Olympic type of track speed as well, and that's a combination that you certainly want. Oregon and USC, very, very hot in this recruitment. Penn State and Texas A&M also in this one. Watch out for Tomahini Tupoi. Now, he's a defensive lineman coming out of Matter Day once again. They engineer a lot of high-level high school football players, if you haven't figured that out already. But Tomahini Tupoi, as a defensive lineman, he was the Trinity League MVP last season. There is smoke for a USC flip right here. And that would be a huge flip. Now, I talked about Jonas Williams and maybe the dominoes that fell and the reason why. I think both teams, if Oregon is able to go out and they're able to beat Georgia, and if they're able to get Jared Curtis right now, I think that's going to work out great for both schools. And I think that's certainly the way that it's trending for that specific position. But if USC is able to flip Tomahini Tupoi from Oregon, that is huge. That is going to be huge and really signal a momentum shift for the Trojans, certainly going forward as well. So Arrington, Tapoy, Ryder Lyons, Mark Bowman, Davon Benjamin, these are recruitments that I'm keeping an eye on. If USC is able to win a majority of these recruitments over Oregon, yes, I know that there's other schools involved, but if they're able to win a majority of these recruitments over Oregon, maybe the pendulum is going to start to shift a little bit. Oregon has a head start. Okay, so it's going to take a little bit, I think, for USC to really be able to get to that point that they were in the past. And Dan Lanning is a hell of a closer. He's a hell of a recruiter. But, man, I am here for the battles. And I think the reason why I like USC, why I love USC getting more involved in these recruiting battles and focusing on what they should focus, it should be a prerequisite. If you're a head coach at USC, you need to recruit the state of California well. Is there were too many SEC schools coming in to the state of California and winning these recruitments. Remember Bryce Young, the current quarterback of the Carolina Panthers? He was originally a USC commit. I think that was during the Clay Helton era. Alabama came in and flipped him. There have been some other players, quarterbacks, and other high-level players out of the state of California. Because USC has not been a high-level recruiting power, the SEC has been able to develop a little bit of pipeline over there to the Golden State. We got to shut that down. I think Oregon and USC right now, you look up and down the state of California, the top 10 to top 15 players. There's a lot of O's. There's a lot of interlocking SC logos as far as the leaders of a lot of these players. And that's the way it's meant to be. I can't wait to see these battles shake out. From the West Coast, let's head over to the East Coast. And the Maryland Terrapins folks are making noise because they're going after their hometown heroes. Now, when you look at some of the top demographics, when you look at some of the top areas to really go after recruits, you're looking at the aforementioned California, you're looking at Texas, you're looking at Florida. Like, we know the suspects where a lot of these talented places are and these talented markets are, where there's a high density of talent. Don't sleep on DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and specifically the M, specifically Maryland. Go dial up 24/7 Sports. Go dial up On3. Go dial up Rivals. And go to state rankings in the state of Maryland. Maryland produces really good high school talent. And the Maryland Terrapins, man, they are going after, and they are being fairly successful on the recruiting trail with this high-end talent in the state of Maryland. Just like you can't talk about Big Ten recruiting without talking about Oregon and USC, you can't talk about Maryland and the investment that they're putting into their home kids in their home state without talking about On3's number one overall recruit in the country, that being Zion Elee, a 6'4", 220-pound edge rusher. And folks, there were official visits scheduled to Auburn, I think some SEC schools, some Big Ten schools were in there as well. Hell, if you're the number one recruit in the country, yeah, you're going to have Big Ten schools after you. You're going to have SEC schools after you, most certainly. Zion Elee, couple of weeks ago, shut it down. Canceled those visits on his calendar. He will be a Terp. Gigantic, huge win for Mike Loxley and this Maryland football team to really seal him up at this time. He just ragdolls players around, man. His power, I think, is a little bit of underrated. I think when a lot of people speak to his film, they're going to look at that speed. They're going to look at that explosiveness. I talk about that extremely quick second burst. I think when you come off the line of scrimmage, and then when you're able to get that position, you're able to get that leverage against an offensive tackle. Then once you're able to kind of get into that second burst, he's able to really get there in a quick period of time. He gets to the backfield sometimes quicker than like a running back or the offense really should. That's how much faster and quicker and explosive that he looked on tape playing high school football in the Baltimore area over there. Just like when you look at some of the key positions on a football team, and I'm going to talk about the other local kid that they're going after here in just a little bit. The edge rusher, a pass rusher, that's as big of a position that you can hope for to have that high level of talent for Maryland. He's going to get on the football field, and he's going to be playing right away. He's going to be playing for the 2026 Maryland Terrapins. No doubt about that. Now, we talk about edge on one side, the position that the edge rushers are going up against, the offensive tackle. I think it's one of the most important positions on the football field. There is another Baltimore area kid, the number 2 offensive tackle in the country, a top 5 overall player in Emmanuel Iheanacho, 6'5", 350 pounds, another Baltimore area kid, and he does a great job with keeping distance in pass protection situation. He's got the long arms, he's got the leverage, he's got everything you might look for of a future NFL offensive tackle. If they're able, now here's the thing about Emmanuel right now, and this is kind of a very recent development. Emmanuel has named his 2 leaders. Maryland is his leader right now, and the Oregon Ducks are number 2. Now, it is going to be hard to hold off the machine that is Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks. There's no question about that. But if Maryland is able to land the number 1 overall, 2 top 5 players in the country coming to College Park, not going to Alabama, not going to Oregon, not going to Georgia, but coming to College Park, Maryland at 2 extremely key positions where they're going to start right away and make an impact right away. And I think that's part of the package I think you got to think that Mike Locksley is selling. Not only can they remain hometown heroes and play for their hometown school, but they can play right away, get on the field, probably make more money, certainly right away in College Park, Maryland as well. Combine that, you got a quarterback in the 25 cycle that's going to be a true freshman this year in Malik Washington, out of the state of Maryland, out of that area certainly as well. He's got a big frame and a big body and a big arm. Will he start this year? I don't know. Maybe not at the beginning of the year. But these are good players. Here's the thing about Maryland. I don't think that they can do the USC. They don't have the brand power of a USC where, hey, let's draw a 70-mile circle around LA and let's recruit that and let's build a championship team. You've got Notre Dame coming into Maryland. Penn State has lived in Maryland for a long time when it comes to a recruiting standpoint. You've got SEC teams certainly coming up and in the state of Maryland and getting commitments from some of these top 5, top 10 players in the state. So I don't think Maryland's going to be able to say, hey, we're going to be able to get 6 to 7 of the top kids in the state of Maryland and in this area every single year. They just don't have, I think, the resources, the brand power to be able to do that, to be able to compete, and the success on the field, of course, to be able to compete with some of these other schools that are coming in there. But if Maryland can get like the top 2, maybe top 3 of 10, or maybe 3 of like the top 12 players, and they're high-level players every single year, all of a sudden you're going to start to see this roster build up a little bit. And Maryland's going to continue to get better and better and better, and they're going to be able to reach those heights that they haven't been able to reach. Before this year, it was that 6-6, it was that 7-5. That was really the ceiling of this program. You recruit more high-level players out of high school, out of this area, you're going to see your program develop a lot. Last thing that I want to touch on with Maryland right now is I'm very curious to see how the Maryland administration is going to handle this going into next season with Mike Locksley. They're coming off a 4-8 season. They had just one Big Ten win over USC this past season. Like, what if they go 4-8 again? What if they go 5-7 again? You have to balance what Mike Locksley and the staff is doing from a recruiting standpoint, bringing in this talent, but you also need to see results on the field. Will they be a little bit more patient to see the Malik Washingtons, the Zion Elees, and maybe the Emmanuel Iheanachos get a little bit more experience and maybe bring more players with them? That's a balance that this Maryland administration certainly has to make in the future. But if you're a Terp fan, you are excited about the future for the old red and yellow and black of the Terps. As the conference that has won back-to-back national championships, the Big Ten, we're focused on number 1. And I want to go to recruiting battles for the number 1 running back in the country and the number 1 offensive tackle in the country. When you look at the number 1 running back in the country out of the state of Virginia, Savion Hyder, Michigan right now this is one of their main targets right now. We saw what they were able to do late in the recruiting cycle with Bryce Underwood, the number one quarterback in the country last season, going to certainly be able to step onto campus and play an impact of some sort at quarterback for the Wolverines this season. And we know when it comes to Michigan football, when it comes to the identity of Michigan football, running back is one of those maize and blue pillars that they really look at in terms of a position. When you look at Savion Hyder, in December, he said that Michigan was his top school, and Michigan continues to be hot and heavy over him as one of their top targets on the recruiting trail right now. So usually that is a great combination for a kid to eventually land in Ann Arbor, Michigan and sign on the dotted line in December right now, but he is uncommitted as of this point. He's the number 11 overall prospect in the new On 300 rankings, a big riser. He went, I believe, from 20 up to 11, so plus 9. Usually at this time of year, when you see kids that are big risers, that is certainly optimistic for what they can be in the future going into their senior season and some of these camps that they'll be attending throughout the summer. When I look at Hyder, I'm like, that's a Michigan running back. That's a Michigan running back. He's a no-nonsense physical runner between the tackles. He's certainly got some speed to be able to bounce it to the outside. Does he have the breakaway speed? It's good. It's good. I've certainly, I think, seen better with some other kids in this class in 2026 as well. But this is a Michigan guy. He's going to run between the tackles. He's smash personified. Like, when I watched him, I saw the winged helmet. I saw the maize and blue, and he's got fantastic vision and one-cut ability. Based on what I've kind of heard and based on what I know, I think it would be an upset if Michigan did not land this guy right now. You look at Michigan's current running back situation, Justice Haynes transferring in from Alabama. You've got a second-year guy in Jordan Marshall. I think they're setting up Savion Hyder to be the next guy after those two, certainly, in the backfield for the Michigan Wolverines. The running back tradition ain't going nowhere. Of course, Blake Corum, a native of the state of Virginia as well. Savion Hyder has talked about that in some interviews as well, following in that legacy. Jackson Cantwell, the number one offensive tackle in the country right now. Number 2 overall player in the country. Prior to maybe some shifting, he was the number 1 overall player in the country. And man, he's just a Big Ten bully. He is just a bully. I kind of watch him. I mean, he's got the height. He's got the size. He's got everything. He's got the power. He's got the length in terms of his arms and pass protection. Like, he's got everything you would want from an offensive tackle that could possibly come in and play right away. Now, 3 Big Ten schools are in his final 6, but listening to Steve Wiltfong, Steve tends to favor right now Georgia as maybe the leader in this recruitment. But Oregon and Michigan are also in tier 1 of this recruitment, according to On3's Steve Wiltfong right now. Now, in recruiting, there's a lot of domino effect. I think Oregon's involvement in Jackson Cantwell, I think a lot of it is going to depend on what happens with Emmanuel Iheanacho. And it could be vice versa as well. If Oregon goes in really heavy on Jackson Cantwell, maybe Emmanuel sees that and he ends up committing to Maryland. So Oregon is not going to get both of those guys. Getting 3 offensive tackles, all in the top 10 overall in the country, would be utter insanity. It is not going to happen, I think, no matter how much money is offered. So I think it's going to be Iheanacho or Cantwell, or none of them for the Ducks. So that's going to be an interesting domino to certainly follow as well. And Steve was kind of talking about wait for Michigan to make a late push. We know how strong the offensive line culture is for Sharon Moore and the Michigan Wolverines right now. So Oregon and Michigan highly involved. I think that this is going to be one of the more intriguing battles as Jackson takes his visits throughout the spring. This is one that you're going to want to keep your eye on, certainly in combination with Emmanuel Iheanacho as well. We started on the West Coast, we went to the East Coast, and now I want to finish in the middle of Big Ten country with a school that has as much momentum maybe as any Big Ten school. I know Michigan's out there that beat Ohio State. They beat Alabama. They got Bryce Underwood. They signed the number 6 class in the country. I get that. But Illinois is moving with as much momentum, I think, as anybody right now. They're coming off one of their best seasons in not only recent history, but maybe all of history. Maybe when I say recent history with Illinois, 20 years, 25 years, last 30 years for the Illini, beating South Carolina in the bowl game, a 10-win season. And I think that on-the-field success is translating to the recruiting trail as well. Bret Bielema, and I think this year was a big proving point. Bret Bielema is one of the best head coaches in the Big Ten. When it comes to developing talent, I trust Bret Bielema maybe more than any coach in the Big Ten. Growing up in the state of Wisconsin and watching what he was able to do when he got separated from Barry Alvarez, I saw what he was able to do at Wisconsin. You know, they recruited 3-star kids. You throw in some 5-star kid or 4-star kids. Of course, they had more high-level offensive linemen. They were able to attract more highly rated offensive linemen at Illinois. But when it comes to the rest of the team, you know, they certainly didn't have as many stars behind their name as they did at maybe some other schools, but they still had a tremendous amount of success. And then when you look to Illinois, you look at that 2022 season, Devin Witherspoon a 0-star recruit. I believe I remember hearing that from somewhere, but a lot of those guys were not extremely highly rated. And a lot of those guys found their way to the National Football League. And now you see the success on the field, and you see the development taking place with 3-star guys and, you know, a few 4-star guys every single class. But what happens if Bret Bielema gets high-level high school talent? What happens if Bret Bielema gets top 100 high school talent? I think this thing is, we talk about these 10-win seasons. I think that these 8 to 10-win seasons are going to be more expectations. I think they're going to be more consistent. If Bret Bielema is able to do what he's been able to do so far in the 26th cycle, it is extremely early, but this is a number 7 class in the country right now, and it is led by a top 50 overall commitment in Victor Singleton, a 6-foot, 160-pound cornerback from Catholic Central in Toledo, Ohio. He's the number 3 corner in this class. And when you look at, hey, if Illinois is going to go out and get a high level of player, what position do you think it would be? Defensive back is probably the position that I would go to. Like, whether it was, 2022, a lot of people are saying, hey, maybe that development was a lot more Aaron Henry than it was Ryan Walters. And then you kind of see what Xavier Scott and company was able to do, creating turnovers and what they were able to do from a defensive standpoint this season. You can see the development. You can see why defensive backs would be attracted to a place like Illinois. And when I look at Victor Singleton's tape, like, at his size and stature, he loves to hit. He loves to make contact. He loves to come up to the line of scrimmage and play the run. And he's got a great ability to really find the football, go to the football very, very quickly. And he's just a playmaker. Like, when you look at somebody, like I mentioned in a Xavier Scott, when you look, there are ball hawks on these Illinois defenses. And I think Victor Singleton really fits in well, because he just looks to make plays. He is a playmaker. He's looking to strip the ball. He's looking to get the ball in his hands, create turnovers, maybe create points going back the other way. He just goes and make plays. He finds the football on the defensive side right now. He's got fantastic ball skills in some of these one-on-one battles. He's fantastic in man coverage right now. This is a big commitment, but there's another top 100 player that Steve Wiltfong has logged a prediction for Illinois, and it's at the wide receiver position. Nasir Rankin, 6'1", 170, out of Morgan Park in Chicago right now. Now, he said, Oregon, USC, hey, man, those are kind of some dream schools out there as well. So this is going to be a battle. There's no doubt about it. Bret Bielema is going to have a battle on his hands right now, but the local kid, I think, provides something that when you look at Illinois football, this is not a talent that you would maybe normally expect Illinois to get out of high school. The thing about Nasir, you look at his size, you look at his frame, and then you look at what Morgan Park did with him. They lined him up in the slot a lot. And when he's lined up in the slot, I think that's when he showed a lot of his best stuff on tape. Really finding the weakness in the defense, catching the ball, and then making plays once he has the ball in his hands. They kind of got him in on some jet sweeps certainly as well. So it's very clear that they just wanted to get the ball in his hands somehow, some way, and then let him create certainly from there. If Nasir Rankin, a top 100 player, is able to commit to the Illinois Fighting Illini and he signs on the dotted line, these two top 100 players could really be a foundation and a building block for more consistent, higher level recruiting success for Illinois. And if that happens, all bets are off, and just how consistently good this Illinois football program could truly be. Man, I love talking about recruiting. I love talking about recruiting. I think you're going to see more recruiting coverage here on the show and here on the channel in the weeks to come, in the months to come, because as we get into unofficial visits in the spring, as we get into official visits, towards May and June, there are going to be some battles. There are going to be some dominoes that are going to fall, and I cannot wait to cover it all. So until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms to stay in the know on all things Big Ten football.